Hey, so it's night time in the UK. I'm filming this at night because during the day I was busy doing loads of other things, applying for jobs, etc. And I'm filming this my lamp right in front of me because last time I filmed it at night it was quite dim. But I'm about to head to bed, and I thought I would come in and talk about Gwendoline Riley because she's one of my favourite authors, and I don't think she gets enough recognition. Um, So I've been drinking a mug of tea in my BFG mug. I love this. It's so cute. It's from Sainsbury's, and eating cake that I made, Victoria sponge cake, which is lush, if I say so myself. So yeah, I wanted to come in and talk about Gwendoline Riley. So Gwendoline Riley is, I think she's 41 now. So for I think most fiction writers, that would seem like, oh, they're still kind of a bit early on in their career, maybe, or they're kind of entering mid career. But for Gwendoline Riley, she wrote her first novel when she was 21. So um, she's written five novels and now she's 41. And so I don't know what kind of stage she's at because she kind of started off early, but then she's not been like hugely productive like, say, Margaret Atwood. But I think it's because she writes totally differently to Margaret Atwood. But anyway, so her first novel, I'm going to talk about her novels in general, and then maybe talk about just a bit about her because I love her so much. So her first novel, Cold Water, was published when she was 22, I think. But Gwendoline Riley went to Manchester Metropolitan Uni, and I guess they saw her writing, were like, wow, you need to get out there, and they published her first book, and she got a two-book deal. So she wrote Cold Water, and um, then because she had a two-book deal, she had to write a second novel. So then when she was like 20, maybe when she was like 23, 24, she came out with her second novel, which was not this is a short story collection, but it was Sick Notes. At the moment, I've given Cold Water and Sick Notes to a friend who's reading them, so I don't have it. But I ordered this short story collection of hers, and then it turned out that the novella in it, a novella and a short story, is just Sick Notes. So that that is the novella, and then this is a short story. So they're not really short stories; they're more like fragments of a novel that Gwen and Riley just didn't know what to do with, or they were like little experiment she did because Gwen and Riley normally writes in first person, so everything's first person in her novels, and then in the short stories, some of them were like third person. So it's interesting seeing her write in the different modes, but normally she writes in first person. So she came out with Sick Notes, and Cold Water, when it came out, her first novel, won like a Betty Trask Award and got a bit of recognition. And then I think she felt pressure with her second novel. And then when she wrote her second novel, Sick Notes, which is basically like a novel with similar ambitions to the first novel, I think maybe people were disappointed. I don't know, because this was like early noughties, and I was too young then to know about stuff like this. So Sick Notes didn't really get much recognition. She did interviews and things for it, but it didn't get any awards or anything, or much discussion, as far as I know. But Sick Notes covers similar ground to Cold Water, but the narrator is a bit older. So all her narrators in her novels are first person women narrators who bear some sort of resemblance to Gwendoline Riley herself at that stage. So they're not necessarily her, but they're kind of like a version of her, maybe. Um, so in Sick Notes, Esther is a writer and she's just bobbing around Manchester. So a lot of the books are set in Manchester, which is also why I feel like an affinity for them because I spent my early adulthood in Manchester and I love it. And so yeah, that's Sick Notes. And then in Sick Notes, at the end of it, or like in the middle of Sick Notes, Esther kind of develops a love interest with this American guy in a band who comes over, and then this American love interest figure kind of makes reappearances in all the novels since then. Um, so I don't know if that's meant to be like something in Gwendoline Riley's life where she had a boyfriend like that, or whether it's meant to be a nod to like the relationship between British literature and American literature. Maybe it is kind of, but it's not over the top. It's like understated, I think. But I think it must be something to do with it because in this her third novel, which she took a bit of a break between them. Well, not a break, but it was 5 years after Sick Notes that she published this. So when she published this, I think she was like 28, maybe. And this channels Natalie as she leaves Manchester, a writer, and then she goes over to America to hang out with Joshua, who is a playwright. So in the other novel, the love interest was a band member, but in this, the love interested is a playwright. But he talks in a similar way to the one in Sick Notes, and in this one, um, it's kind of an on-off relationship, but I think some of the writing is really, really, it's just really good writing. This got shortlisted for the Somerset Maugham Award, I think, when it came out, but I don't think she got that much recognition other than that. It is quite short, so these are novels you can kind of read in a day, um, and they're also quite chunky, big font, which I like in these books. But some of the writing in this is so good. Um, so at the start of it, she's moving out of her friend's house that she's been subletting. Her friend's been subletting her room to her, basically, Natalie. And then she's leaving for America, and her friend says, "It's funny. It's fine. Whether we're together or not is a piece of trivia. I don't think love is a matter of logistics, Natalie. Love is there," she said, and she looked at me as she patted her hand on the floor. "It's right there." She patted the same place, rubbed the orange laminate, all the time, like a saucer. So she's saying that her love is like, that love should just be there, like a saucer on the table. Like, this kind of deep emotion should just be as present in people's lives as like an inanimate object, which is kind of weird, but I think it's beautiful. So there's some writing that is like really beautiful and lyrical, but it's never over the top. And then a lot of the writing is just good dialogue, characters who are complex and can think for themselves, and good descriptive writing. So her novels are never plot focused. They're characters that are just at a stage in their life where they're kind of reflecting, or they've reached some kind of crisis point and they're trying to come to some sort of peace about it. But the novels are never like a cringy like revelation. So in this, Natalie goes over to America and she is trying to see what's going on with her playwright boyfriend Joshua, and they kind of hang out, stay in like this crappy motel, watch shitty movies. So it's not really what you would think was romantic, but there are certain points in the writing where Natalie is like, "Oh my god," like it is really, really romantic. So yeah, I love this book. I think it's really, really beautiful, and I wish they would make an independent movie of it. It would be so good, I think. So yeah. So then, 5 years after she wrote this, Gwen and Riley came out with Opposed Positions, and Opposed Positions. I mentioned this in my like is it idiom delirium video, where I don't like the cover and that it didn't get much recognition. But some of the writing I think in this book is her best writing. So in this one, Aislinn is she's a woman narrator. She is a writer she's 30 and she's reached a crisis point where she has no money and she's having to like hit her mum up for money. So this book explores the kind of pathology where the character is like, I want to be a writer, but my life isn't working at the moment. And I don't know why, and I need to figure it out. I need a job, don't know what the hell I'm doing with my life. And she kind of reflects back on her life to try and consider how she got to the place she's in. So the novel opened with her thinking how her parents got together. So she didn't witness it. she just knows what her mum tells her and what people have told her. So she's describing it, and then the mum and dad break up when she's really young in the novel, and the novel kind of just charters that and is like, what effect did this have on the narrator? And what are they like now? So now the mother in it is like a really fractious, kind of hysterical woman. So she's always fun. But she also is very emotionally distant. So you get the sense in this that Aislinn's needs, like emotional needs, are never met, which is why things have kind of gone to shit in her life. And she's trying to figure out how she can possibly, feel peaceful and feel wanted in the world, feel wanted to herself. So the books can be read as kind of quite depressing, but I don't find them depressing, because I think Gwendoline Riley's perspective is always psychological. So it's never like self-helpy or cringy or offering like false consolation. It's always inquisitive and kind of semi-analytical about describing the way things happen in this person's life. And they're kind of characters who've got to points in their lives where they're thinking, I need to get my needs met, but I don't know how. How's this going to work? And they're kind of trying to better themselves, even though they don't know how to. So it's always a kind of human struggle in her books that I think she always brings home. So in this book, the father in it is vile. So that's one of the great things that works in this book, I think, is that the father is just such a vile figure that he creates such a big contrast from all the other characters that they seem interesting just because they contrast to him so much. And there's a part with so in this Aislinn, she's remembering about when she was doing her MA in Manchester, and she's just at the computer cluster doing some work, and then she gets an email, and it's from her father, and her father just starts harassing her through her emails. And there's a point in it where the father hacks Aislinn's, as a writer, her Wikipedia page, and it is kind of funny. So Gwendoline Riley always toes the line between things being like really bleak and horrible and just kind of being funny, because they're just so ridiculously kind of horrible that they're funny. So there's a bit where the father hacks her Wikipedia page and is basically calling Aislinn just a sham writer. And I'm pretty sure in real life, Gwendoline Riley's Wikipedia page got hacked. And then when I looked up how they were hacked, they were the exact same wording, except that in this, the titles of the novels are different. So, I mean, I don't know if Gwendoline Riley's father hacked her Wikipedia page, but it could have just been her hacking it herself. I don't know, but it's really interesting finding little things like that. But so yeah, the father is vile, and then the mother retires towards the end of the novel. So the novels do have a kind of roundedness where they feel rounded off just at the right point, which can be difficult for an introspective first-person novel, knowing where to end the novel when it's not a plot-focused book. But I think Gwendoline Riley always ends them at the right place. And then on to her latest book, which was First Love. So if you have heard of Gwendoline Riley, you've probably heard of her because of this novel, which was shortlisted for the Women's Prize in 2017. I discovered Gwendoline Riley in 2017, but I didn't discover her for this. I discovered her because on a creative writing course I was doing, the recommended reading one of the books set was Cold Water, her first novel. So I read that, and then I was like, how did she write this when she was only 21? Like, I fell in love with it. And then I read First Love and fell in love with Gwendoline Riley even more. But in this book, unlike the chunky font in her previous books, the font's quite sparse, which I think really, really works. So in this book, Neve is the narrator, and Neve is in her mid-30s. She's a poor writer, and then she ends up marrying this guy called Edwin, who's older than her and more well off, and she's lived in Manchester, then she moved up to Glasgow, and then she moves to London to live with Edwin, who she doesn't really know that well. She's only met him 3 times, but you kind of get the sense that Neve is this kind of needy person, needy Neve, who just jumps into relationships full feet first, and then when they don't work out, she's like, "Oh my god, my life's a mess." So the narrators in her novels are always just really interesting people. I think if they didn't have issues, they'd be really boring, but because they have issues, they're interesting. And this novel spans like 7 years, I think, and then I think it's only in the last like year or two that she's married to Edwin. So and the marriage is like volatile. So Edwin has like fibromyalgia, and then he has a heart attack, I think. But in this, the father figure dies. So the father figure dies of a heart attack, and people have speculated whether Edwin is like an actual real character or whether he's just you know, a piece of fiction that Neve devised, because Neve is a writer as well. And I think if I just read you this point from First Love, I can give you my tidbit on what I think about Edwin. So, there was a lot of shouting from him back then. Long nights when his agitation, his flinches and side glances would coalesce into a stronger force. Might you say we were coming to an accommodation? Two people who'd always expected, planned to live their lives alone? I'd never lived with anyone before. I had no idea what it might bring out in me. Certainly I remember feeling that it was his dream world, his symbol world that we were dragged into during those first arguments. And it frightened me, being given, as I saw it, the part of a training dummy, outfitted in colours, slogans that I could not see. So in this, Neve has a kind of emptiness to her that she lets other characters inhabit. Like, they fill it out through her being vacant. And I think Edwin is a kind of projection of all her issues onto someone that she's lived with. So I think she said that she's never lived with anyone, and then to go from not living with someone to then being married to someone you don't even know that well, probably, and living with them every day, I imagine that would be really intense. And so the way the novel's intense, I think, works. And I think Edwin is a projection of like the issues she has with her father, who was vile to her, because the father in it is vile too. I think she projects those issues onto Edwin. So I don't necessarily think Edwin is possibly abusive to her, but I think, or that he had a heart attack, because the father died of a heart attack as well. So that just seems like too much of a coincidence to go unnoticed. I think Edwin is just a projection of her issues onto her husband. So I think Neve does have a husband, but I don't think he's as malicious as Edwin is. I think he maybe has like fibromyalgia, possibly, but I don't think he's had a heart attack. Like, I read those as Neve trying to write this into her life, to get stuff out of her. And then I think when the novel ends with Edwin leaving on the train, and you're like, okay, so is Edwin leaving her completely? But Neve is the one that lives in his house, so that wouldn't be right. So I think maybe he was leaving to go to work or something. So the novel is kind of left open-ended whether she does leave him or not, which I think, because it's about an abusive relationship, is a good way to end it, because there's always the thing about, the abuser getting the victim to come back to them, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I love this book. So this book did get a lot of praise. So Gwendoline Riley finally got some of the recognition she deserved. And I can't wait to see what Gwendoline Riley does next. Apparently she's writing a new novel called My Phantoms, but I don't know, she might change the title because it's not actually been confirmed. But I can't wait for that. But what I also find out about Gwendoline Riley is that, what I also love about her is that even if you don't enjoy her novels that much, like, because I think when First Love came out, a lot of people didn't like it because they found the woman a bit of a shrew, I guess, and they don't like that the narrator keeps things away from them, and that the narrator isn't interested in making you like them. The narrator's not interested in showing you beautiful things for the sake of it. So neither's a writer. So some of the passages are really good writing. You can see I've quoted a lot of it because I love these books. But they're not right. They're not beautiful in a for the sake of it way. They're beautiful in a kind of spooky, emotional way. And I think sometimes people don't gel with that much. So I think if you like books like The Bell Jar and The Catcher in the Rye, and maybe if you like Anne Enright, you'll probably love Gwendoline Riley. So yes, if you're still not sure how you feel about Gwendoline Riley as a writer, because her books do seem quite personal, I'll link an interview she did where she kind of talks about her writing life and her personal life a bit. But I think as a writer, even if you don't like her books that much, I think you could admire her just as a writer because of her conviction she has to her craft. So she started writing when she was, like, she wrote her first novel when she was 21, got it published, and since then has been writing books ever since. So even though she might have long intervals between where she publishes books, like 5 novels between when all her novels are, pretty short, in an interview she talked about how she writes every day, and how because her novels aren't plot focused, she just writes every day and then sees kind of what comes to fruition, and then she has this kind of massive material, and then she notices things that interlink between the writing she does, and then she gets ideas for a novel and then forms it that way. So she kind of sculpts things into a novel. So loads of editing goes on, loads of redrafting, I imagine, must be going on. So it just sounds like every novel, even though it's only thin, they're kind of thin in the same way that Muriel Sparks novels are thin, where they're not thin because they're not well thought out or there's not that much that's been invested in the novel. They're thin because the author knows, they need to get down to the quick of it, and that they're not going to waste people's time with filibustering and overwriting. I think she's one of those novelists like Muriel Spark who knows that the reader's attention is valuable, and that they only want to show the reader the important parts. And even though Gwendoline Riley's, the narrators in her books, they do have introverted perspectives. So even though the writing isn't plot focused like Muriel Sparks' writing can be, they are like relationship focused and like emotionally focused. So they are quite fluid. So I think with writing kind of emotional fluid work, there can kind of be a huge want to overwrite things, and I think it's amazing that Gwen Riley puts so much, she manages to cram so much into these books without it being really loud. The books are always quite quiet and understated and level, even though they're talking about all these big issues in people's lives. So yeah, if you've not read Gwendoline Riley, I would highly, highly recommend her. And if you have read her, what did you think of her? So yeah, those are my thoughts on Gwendoline Riley, and thanks for watching. Bye.